Hello, welcome to the Polyglot Files. My name is Michael, and today we're talking about, well, if you've clicked on this video, you already know what it is. Back in December 2017, I filmed a video that created quite a stir. It was entitled, "Is Tamil the oldest language in the world?" And in addition to a lively debate, as well as some pretty nasty comments, I have been asked again and again and again to reconsider the topic and perhaps change my answer. So today, despite perhaps my better judgment, I have decided to answer the question, is Tamil the oldest language in the world? Yet. Namely, can we prove definitively that Tamil in its current form is the language that the first humans used when they began to speak? First, a disclaimer, because there is a little bit of confusion. Tamil may be the oldest continuously spoken language, meaning that it is the language that has been spoken the longest throughout the history of time, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about whether or not Tamil was the first language ever spoken when humans began to speak. In other words, it is believed in the scientific community that through neurological development and evolutionary jumps, humans developed the anatomy and the brain power to speak language as early as 200,000 years ago. The claim that I'm examining in this video is whether or not Tamil is that first language. In fact, over the course of the 2 years since my first video was published, new evidence and new theories have emerged. Let's consider them one by one. The first claim in the way of proving that Tamil is the oldest language in the world is that some believe that many, if not all of the words in the English language are derived from Tamil. In fact, according to some commenters, thousands of words have been borrowed from Tamil and are used in everyday English speech. But is that true? According to a study in 1973 by Thomas Finkenstedt and Dieter Wolf that analyzed 80,000 English words, 25% of them had native Germanic roots, 28.3% came directly from French, 28.24% came from Latin, 5.32% came from Greek, and less than 5% came from unknown origins or other languages such as Tamil. In contrast, according to sources such as the Oxford English Dictionary, about 100 words in English come directly from the Tamil language. Unfortunately, there just isn't any evidence to prove that thousands of English words come from Tamil, nor does that then prove that Tamil is the first or the oldest language. The second piece of offered evidence that could prove to us that Tamil is the oldest language in the world comes to us from an American scholar. Here's the theory. According to a man named Alex Collier, Tamil was the original human language. Apparently, however, as humans evolved and developed and created new technologies, the aliens who were watching us became threatened by our progress. Because we became too powerful, extraterrestrials from outer space came down and gave us a bunch of languages that were drastically different from Tamil in an attempt to confuse us and thus squander our power. Yeah. Even if we accept that extraterrestrials exist, and then we accept that extraterrestrials care enough about us little humans to try and stifle our potential, this theory seems a little bit ridiculous? But don't take it from me. Take it from Alex Collier's sparkling track record. Namely, Alex Collier is not a scientist, nor is he a linguist, and he has no scientific background, whether in linguistics, astronomy, or otherwise. Instead, he claims he has been in constant contact with blue aliens called Andromedans, and he stylizes himself as a Andromedan contactee. Okay. It's also important to point out that Alex Collier has been accused of being a fraud and a con man for decades. And in fact, Alex Collier may not even be a real person because that might not actually be his name. There's a whole article about this on a website called Truth Control. That also sounds like a really sketchy website, but I digress. And if you're interested in finding out the finer details of this situation, click on the link in the description. Turns out there's drama in the alien community. Who knew? So, in conclusion, final notes on Alex Collier: not reliable, doesn't prove that Tamil is the oldest language in the world. The third piece of evidence that may prove that Tamil is the oldest language in the world is actually pretty promising. This evidence has to do with excavations that have been done in the province of Tamil Nadu in southern India that have given us some insight about early Dravidian civilizations. After years of supposed suppression at the hands of the Indian government, as well as funding insecurities, it appears we finally have something concrete that may prove the age of the Tamil language. Back in 2017, I reported that written records of the Tamil language could only date that language to around 500 to 300 BCE. With the conclusion of the excavations at the Kizhadi villages in southern India, it appears that we can move that date back. In fact, according to new samples of Tamil Brahmi script, we can safely date the Tamil language to having existed at 600 BCE, which is about 100 to 300 years earlier than we originally thought. However, written Sumerian dates back to 3500 BCE. Egyptian hieroglyphics date back to 3300 BCE. We even have written records of Akkadian, Hittite, Chinese, Mycenaean Greek, Hebrew, Phoenician, and even Latin that date back to a time before Tamil was written down. Like I mentioned in my previous video, this doesn't mean that Tamil was not spoken before 600 BCE. We know that spoken language almost always comes before written language. However, this just means that the findings of these excavations do not prove that Tamil is older than any of these other languages. Sure, they prove Tamil is old, nobody's denying that, but they do not prove that Tamil was the first language spoken on Earth, simply because other languages have written records that predate the existing written records that we have of Tamil as of today. August 4th, 2020. Lastly, and this is the moment we've all been waiting for, even if Alex Collier is a con man with no scientific background, even if there aren't that many words that are in English that have been borrowed from Tamil, and even if the new findings from the excavations in Tamil Nadu don't date Tamil back to a time earlier than other languages, is there a way we can definitively say that Tamil is the oldest language in the world? Well, yes, we can. In fact, I am happy to announce that yes, Tamil is the oldest language in the world. There's one catch, however. Tamil shares this feat with the 7,000 some odd other languages that are also spoken on Earth in the present day. It's not so much of a cool title if you have to share it with 7,000 other languages, is it? This is because that the idea of an oldest language is a logical fallacy. If you're speaking a modern-day language, whether Tamil, English, Chinese, Arabic, an indigenous language to the Americas or Australia, you are already speaking the oldest language in the world. In fact, philosophically, it has to be the oldest language in the world, or else you wouldn't be speaking it. That's because if you're speaking a modern-day language, it had to come from somewhere. It didn't just emerge from the sky, unless you're Alex Collier. In which case it did. All languages spoken in the modern day evolved from a predecessor, and that language evolved from a predecessor, and that predecessor evolved from a predecessor, going back and back and back and back to the original predecessor. This means that all modern day languages are descendants of previous languages that have slowly changed over time since the dawn of man and since we have had the capacity to speak. For example, we can look at modern English and trace it back to being the original human language if we wanted to. That's because the English that we speak today evolved from Shakespeare's early modern English that came from Middle English, that came from Old English, that evolved from Proto-English, which was spoken by certain Germanic groups who at one point all spoke the same language called Proto-West Germanic, which presumably came from Proto-Germanic, the shared ancestor of all Germanic languages, including English, Dutch, Afrikaans, and German. Proto-Germanic likely came from some branch of Proto-Indo-European, which was spoken in the Caucasus region from 4500 BCE to 2500 BCE, which in itself was probably brought to that region as humans migrated from Africa, the supposed birthplace of modern humans, where we all presumably spoke a first language theorized to be Proto-Human language 200,000 years ago. Whew, don't make me say that again. What I'm saying is that all modern-day languages, English, Tamil, Chinese, can be traced back to Proto-Human in some way. So in that sense, Tamil is the oldest language in the world, but it also shares that title with 7,000 other languages that are currently being spoken right now. If we want to get technical, does that mean that Proto-Human is literally a copy-paste of Tamil, where the exact words and the exact grammar of Tamil are Proto-Human? How? We can't say. Sure, it's possible that Tamil is the form of Proto-Human language that has not changed to the modern day, but it's also possible that 7,000 languages were just let loose on human beings, like diseases, to confuse us. While we cannot prove that Tamil is exactly the way that Proto-Human was, we can logically prove that Tamil is the oldest language in the world. However, we could also logically prove that all the languages are the oldest language in the world. So, with all this said, I am closing my personal book on Tamil. If you're interested in the research I did in this video and you would like to do some more digging, feel free to check out my references in the description box. Don't forget to check me out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I post there sometimes. As usual, thank you for watching the Polyglot Files, and I will see you next time. Cool. Now let's clean up this mess I've made because I broke a studio light. R.I.P. studio light. I'll miss you.